Greetings, friends. I have a lot to say today, alright? Today I'm going to be talking about linguistics and the applicability to language learning. Now, here's my background. I've got an undergraduate degree, a BA in linguistics, okay? I'm also in a master's program right now in the field of TESOL, or Teaching English, which has a lot of applicability and overlap with second language acquisition, research, and applied linguistics. Okay? Now this is what I want to say, alright? As far as linguistics generally as a field, the way my degree was set up, there were two major areas. One, and if you want to be like a PhD in linguistics, you know, linguistics is a huge field with a lot of different areas. However, as a stepping stone into the field, you need to have a background in syntax, which is basically word order and structure of words, and phonetics, phonology. Phonetics is the different sounds of a language, like a scientific breakdown of your face and tongue and throat, and all the different positions you put your tongue in to make sounds, alright? Phonology is how sounds interact with each other, alright? You have two sounds, and then here's an example for you from phonology, alright? Let's say I have a nasal sound, just a general nasal, right? Like an N. Now I put it before a B. An N is made here. A B is made here. Some languages, their phonological structure is such that when the nasal, here's the nasal, comes before a B, it becomes a It's called place of assimilation for nasals, alright? That's just a quick example. I know everybody doesn't understand that, that's fine. Another thing, I'm going to be using a lot of scientific or linguistics terms here because it's a quick way for me to refer to a topic without having to fully explain it, alright? So, you know, it might sound like I'm talking some kind of gibberish here, but that's just the best way to do it, is if there's something you don't understand, look it up, and then we can have a conversation about that without having me to explain it every time, okay? Alright, so that's, you know, a basic background of linguistics. Syntax, phonetics, phonology. What is syntax? I'll get into that later a little bit, alright? And like I said, it's a huge field. Those three things are the stepping stones. Then you have, you know, morphology, sociolinguistics, second language acquisition, it's just a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, what I really want to talk about is, how is all this stuff applicable if I am the average Joe and I want to learn a new language? Okay, I talked about this in my last video. There's different goals of linguists and language learners. Okay, linguists want to describe a language scientifically, not necessarily to learn how to communicate in that language, but to analyze the language as far as how it works. What's its phonology, phonetics, its syntax, morphology, what kind of discourse analysis goes on, okay? That's the goal. It's not the same as the goal of a language learner, which is to be able to speak the language in order to communicate. Now, these two different goals have overlap, alright? There are some things in linguistics, i.e. the phonetics of the language, if I'm able to understand that from a linguistics point of view, that's very, very applicable to me as a language learner, because I don't have to deal with orthographic conventions. I can go directly to the phonology and find the correspondence between the phonology and the orthography. That's hugely important, okay? And I will stress very much that if you know phonetics, it's probably one of the most important things to help you in language learning. Okay, so the main point I want to take away from that is the goals of language learners and linguists are different. However, there is overlap. Okay, so me being a linguist, that's the point, alright? Next, I'm in a master's program right now for TESOL, alright? Now, that's very applicable to linguistics because there's a lot of overlap with applied linguistics as far as second language acquisition. Now you might think, okay, I'm an expert in second language acquisition. This is going to help me incredibly in my language learning endeavors. Not so much, alright? And here's why. This field of SLA is concerned with the question, and it is, how do people learn a second language? This is a very broad question, alright? I don't want this video to be too long either. It's a very broad question, okay? Now in the field there's like two opposing teams. There's the cognitive side with like Chomsky and Krashen, and then there's the side that's more socially oriented, such as Bonnie Norton and Firth and Wagner, okay? The cognitivists, such as Chomsky, they want to know what are the internal cognitive processes that go on when I learn a language, okay? That's what they're concerned with. The Bonnie Norton, Firth and Wagner side is more concerned about more of the social aspect, as far as what's the situation socially like. Who am I learning the language from? What are the people that I'm involved with learning the language? I want to talk to Steve Kaufman about this, because this doesn't apply to Steve Kaufman at all. He learns languages from books and language learning material and doesn't necessarily need a community to surround himself to positively reinforce him for learning a language. That's fine. A lot of people don't learn, the majority of people do not learn languages that way. That's why he, I talked to him about this before, he doesn't really agree with the stuff that Bonnie Norton and Firth and Wagner research, because it doesn't apply to him. That's fine. It applies to a great deal of people. That's it. So two opposing sides. The cognitive people, like Chomsky, and then the social people. But overall, the field of SLA, it's not a concrete science. Okay? It's not a concrete science, and so the avenues to pursue for the research are not concrete. It's basically just factors that go into it. That's all I'm going to say about TESOL. Again, there's overlap between the goals of SLA, second language acquisition people, and language learners. There's overlap, but again, you can't say they're the same, because if I pursue SLA and I pursue language learning, different goals. I want to communicate in the language versus I want to know how people learn a second language. There's overlap, but they're not the same. Okay, this is the last part of this video. Alright, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. Now, I've got a lot of background in linguistics because I like it. I think it's interesting. And there's a lot of it that I don't like, alright, because it's such a big field. Now, this is what I don't like about linguistics. I don't like the fact that there's a lot of theory that's not grounded, it's not solidly grounded in actual language. Like if I want to be a syntactician, basically there's a lot of theoretical stuff that I think doesn't really apply, that it's too far removed from the actual language. That applies to syntax, I think. It applies to some second language acquisition stuff. And I'm not interested in pursuing that because I like languages. I don't necessarily like complex theories about languages that are far removed from the actual facts. So if I would further pursue linguistics, I would specialize in basically descriptive linguistics, which is describing the language and not so much theorizing about it. Okay, this basically leads into, if you're going to be a descriptive linguist, you basically are going to be working with minority languages and language documentation and language revitalization. That's where my interest lies. However, to do this, you need to do a lot of stuff as far as being able to elicit things from speakers of the language, alright? And there's this guy named Christoph Klogston who is involved with that community. I think that's incredibly interesting, but I don't, that takes a lot. You need to have a lot of skills to be able to document a language. So one area I'm interested in, that's one area. Descriptive linguistics, which is basically leads into minority language documentation, revitalization. Okay. The other thing is language typology. I'm running short on time here, but I want to say linguistics typology is descriptive field dealing with how language structures are different, and it also talks about language universals. Alright, I'm almost done here. I think language typology is very interesting. I made a video about agglutinating, isolating languages. There's a book in there if you're interested. To me it's incredibly interesting, basically dealing with verb valences and alignment structures, word order, but that's all I want to say. That's all I want to say in this video. One thing to take away from this video: linguistics and language learning, very different. Linguistics is a huge field. There is overlap. Thank you.